Okay, so here is our first instructional video for wall framing. This is very similar to the video for floor framing, just this one's going to be a little bit shorter um, and deals with specifically a blank wall section. Um, there will be two subsequent videos, one for laying out for doors, one for laying out for windows. We'll talk about those as we roll on here. So we have reviewed some information. We've taken some notes in um, in our Zoom meetings, and so now here is some instruction to back up and build off of the stuff that we just that you guys watched in the meetings there. Before we get going, grab a piece of paper, grab something to write with. I'm going to ask you a couple of questions as we go through. Give you some time to write those down, and when you're finished, I want you to take a photo of those and submit that onto Canvas. That's how you're going to get credit for watching this video. Now, there are several videos for wall layout. You can put them all on one piece of paper. You can put them on different papers, however you want to do it, but it's gonna be put together there. So here's what we need for wall layout. When I say layout, that's just basically making sure that you've taken all of your studs that you're going to build and they are spaced out properly. Hopefully this thing will work here. That they have the right amount of space between them when you build your wall, and there's proper support. And so just things work easy when you cover OSB, cover drywall, everything lands on a stud and it's going to work out right. And you, like I said, you have the proper amount of support before. So that's the purpose of this layout here. So getting into this, a little bit of specifics. You don't need a whole lot for this. You need building plans to figure out what your layout pattern is. You also need a tape measure, speed square, and something to write with. In our case, I'm using a whiteboard, so we can do multiple layouts on here for practice, and a dry erase marker. But real world, you would use a pencil or a pen. A permanent marker works, it's just not as accurate. I'll talk about more of that a little bit here. So first off, there are several different layout patterns that you're going to encounter. And it's not quite as extensive as floor framing. Typically, you're only going to run with a 16-inch on center pattern and a 24-inch on center pattern. Those are the two layouts that just about everybody uses. 16s, they're close enough together, lots of support, and if you're doing multi-story buildings, that's what you need. If you're doing a single story, you could get away with a 24-inch on center. And you could use 2x4 studs, or you could use 2x6 studs. They're a little bit wider, a little bit stronger. So those are some options there. But most of the work that you guys are going to encounter in this area is going to be 2x4 studs framed at 16 inches on center. Unless you get some of the higher end homes and more custom stuff, then that might change. So I'm going to prep you for 24-inch and 16 inches on center. Now, first things, the term on center means what is the distance from the middle of one stud to the middle of another stud. Right about here is close to 16 inches from the center of this stud to the center of the stud here. And that pattern will go all the way down. 24 inches, a little bit farther apart. Okay? But it's still 2 feet between every stud, or 2 feet from the center of this stud to the center of this stud all the way down. And again, consult your codes, consult your building plans, and tell you what to use. You don't just pick them out. So you tell them what to use. And it's important for a couple of reasons. Number one, you have enough support. Number two, that when your plywood goes on here for your OSB sheathing in the exterior, drywall in the interior, that they land properly. And you don't have one piece of OSB landing and coming out here and not having any support on this edge. Okay, so this actually needs to be about there for a 24-inch piece. Okay, what you want is you want that piece of paneling to land about halfway on a joist. We'll talk more about that in a little bit here. So, starting us off, a couple of things you can do, a couple of things you can do wrong. First thing is what's called offset, on knowing what your offset's going to be. Because if I just put a mark down here and like, oh yeah, I'll pull my tape, and if I'm running 24 inches on center, and I put a mark at 24 inches, 48 is the next multiple, 72, that's going to be wrong, because you don't really know where the center of your board is going to be. Like if you put that mark down there, am I on center now? Am I on center now? I can't see my mark because I'm going to cover it up. So you don't want to mark exactly on your layout patterns. That's one of the mistakes students make, is they'll say, I can say 16 inches on center. They mark right on 16, 24, or 16, 32, 48, all the way down the line. And they're all going to be wrong because all their studs are going to be shifted over. Okay, so never mark exactly on your layouts. You always got to get that offset. Now, how to find your offset? That's determined on the material that you are using. We're using a 2x4 in this case. So a 2x4, fun fact, does not actually measure 2 inches by 4 inches. It measures 1.5 inches by 3.5 inches. Now, for right now, disregard the 3.5. We'll focus on this 1.5. What you want to do is you want to find half the thickness of your stud and subtract that out of your measurement or add it to your measurement. In our case, we're going to be setting behind, which is basically you find that the 2 foot, the 4 foot, the 6 foot marks, and then you add 3/4 of an inch. So it seems like it's a complicated thing, but it's just you find that mark, you add 3/4 of an inch to it. And that's where the side of your board sits. So the center of your board is actually sitting exactly on the mark that you want, exactly where it needs to be to have the proper support and the proper spacing. But when you do your OSB paneling on the outside, everything lands and it's much faster. If you get it wrong, you might have to come back in and add a second board to help support that, which takes time, takes materials. So learning this the right way is the best way to do this. Okay, so in the floor framing video I did for my Carpentry 1 class, I talked about doing a couple of these things incorrect. I'm just going to do a quick refresher on that. If I'm running a 24-inch on center pattern, what you don't want to do is mark at 24 and then move your tape, or like if I'm pulling my tape down here, mark at 24, 48, and 72. Okay, that's the wrong way to do it because you forgot about your offset. Now some people will try to do this number here. They'll say, okay, I'll remember my offset. And what they do is measure 24 3/4. You notice the difference in those two marks here. Okay? And then they'll move their tape over here, and they'll say 24 3/4 again. And then they'll move their tape over here, but 24 3/4 again. Well, now you look at these marks, and you can see how each one is moving farther along down the board. By the time you get to the end of the wall, end of the house, all your studs are going to be way off, and it's not even going to be remotely close. And it's going to be difficult for the framers and whoever comes in actually builds that wall. So don't do it joist by or stud by stud by stud. Don't do that. Stretch your tape out one time and make your marks as you go. And so I'm going to get rid of these couple of wrong marks here. I'm going to show you guys the right way. Before I do want to have you answer a question. What's my offset? Okay, how far, using a 2x4 stud, what is the offset? Okay, how thick is this board, and what's the measurement? Remember, say thickness divided by 2. That's your offset. inch and a half divided by 2. What is your offset? So answer that question down when you have that. Come back to the video and resume. Okay, so I've got my tape stretched out. 24 inches on center is my stud pattern. So I'm going to find my stud and find my 24 inches. Remember, our offset is 3/4 of an inch. So we are adding 3/4. So 24 3/4 is my mark, and X goes on 24. I come down to my next increment of 24, or 2 feet, which is 48 inches, or 4 feet. That plus 3/4 of an inch, X goes on 48. Come down again, 72, 72 3/4, X goes on 72. Now notice how I'm putting my X's in as I go. Guys, if I just had a mark here, a mark here, and a mark here, and I come back like I do a 20-foot long wall, and I come back, to the beginning, I'm like, okay, what side is my X going to be on? I might forget. So as you go, put your mark where your side of your board is and put an X where you want the board to be. I'm going to show you a little bit of detail here on this. Okay. Now once you have the board or the marks done, then you're going to come back and you're going to square across on all your lines here. So when you're looking at this, you're going to have 24 3/4 of an inches. X is on 24. Okay. .48 3/4. X is on 48. Okay, and last one here, 72, 7 3/4 is your mark. X goes on 72. Oh, and also always make sure you have an X on both ends. That way everybody knows that the stud's got to be on both ends here. Okay, now I'm going to start to tape back out here, and I want you all to see this. I'm going to pull this closer to the screen so that you can take a look at it here. Okay, you'll notice in here, I think you should be able to see it now. My X is directly below 48 inches, and my line, noting where the side of the board is going to be on 48 3/4 of an inch. So this is the proper setup up here. I'm going to also pull this over here, and you can see 24 inches is underneath or above my X, and my line is right at 24 3/4. Okay, so when I come through here, now you won't have to put all these measurements on here. That's just me showing you all how to do this. So I'm going to get one board on 24, or one board on 48, one board on, I'm going to try to get these things balanced so y'all can see them standing up here. Okay, so what you're going to want is you're going to want your studs to cover that X, but just kind of see the line on the side of your board. That lets you know that they're in place, they're properly aligned, because you can also, if your board is twisted, you can see that, because when you square across, some people don't square all the way across, they just go by sight. It's wrong. Don't do that. Always try to get the best product that you can. So here is 3 boards properly spaced out at 24 inches on center. Now I'm going to do a quick erase of this. Now I'm going to go to 16 inches on center. Same process, it's just a different number. So with your tape measure, again, in red numbers, or a red box, you're going to have every 16 inches, every 16 increment, all the way down to tape, 16, 32, 48, 64, 80, 96, so on and so forth, all the way down. It's going to be set up. That's just so you can quickly see where to go here. So starting at the beginning, mark at 16 3/4, X on 16. Mark at 32 3/4, X on 32. Mark at 48 3/4, X on 48. Mark at 64 3/4, X on 64. Mark at 80 3/4, X on 80. So when you have those, bring that in, then you come back, you square down. Okay. Now this is all that you have to do when you're working. If it helps you, you certainly can mark both sides of the stud. You know, you could do two, but in the end, it's unnecessary. You don't need two sides to make sure that you have it lined up. You only need one side. And it's going to take more time, and your employer is not going to want you to take more time on doing something that's really not necessary. If you're just learning and it helps you, cool. But once you get into the use of this and into, you know, this becomes more accustomed to you, you only need one line. All right, so measurements here, 16 3/4. X is at 16. 32 3/4. That's a bad 4, but it is what it is. There. 48 3/4, and X is at 48. 64 3/4 is your mark. X is at 64, and 80 3/4 is your last one. X is at 80. Okay, so this also has everything that you need. Again, you don't need to write down the measurements, but make sure your mark is where you need to be, where your X, that shows you where your stud is. And again, this is setting behind. You set ahead, and it's going to be a little bit different, but it's easier for most of my students to grasp the concept of setting behind. So this is a blank wall section. Nothing special about this. This is all this video is going to entail, is just laying out the blank wall sections. Now, what happens when you have a door? What happens when you have a window? Then this is going to be part of your process, but then you have to take some specific measurements to calculate where that door is going to sit, to make sure the opening is going to be wide enough, and make sure it's going to be in the right spot. Same thing with the window, and we will talk about those in the next two videos. So in the meantime, submit your work on Canvas. You guys had it easy, just one question today, or one question for this video. Submit that work on Canvas so you get credit for watching this video. And I'll see you in the next video.